This is Entertainment for Review, and today I'm going to be taking a look at 2001's American Pie 2, the immediate sequel to the original American Pie. For me, this is a comedy classic and a very strong sequel, and I think this is always one of my favorite in the series because this is the first one I saw in the American Pie series before I went back and watched the original back when it came out in 2001. Please be aware if you have not seen this movie that this review will be containing spoilers. So this movie essentially picks up 1 year from where the first movie left off. The group is now finishing their first year of college. So this movie, instead of featuring a group of sex-obsessed high school students, now features a group of sex-obsessed college students. We still have our main core cast of Jim, Finch, Oz, and Kevin. And of course, making his triumphant return is Steve Stifler, who in this movie I believe has been upgraded to a main character, which is a great choice because he's hilarious. And we do get many other returning characters, of course, throughout this movie, which is something I like about this series. They do bring back the same characters over and over again just to give you a brief update on them. And this movie starts out very similar to how the first movie started out, with a party at Stifler's house after they've returned home from college. So this movie does run some immediate parallels to the original movie, but does do things in a different way. We get a parallel where Stifler, of course, gets embarrassed at his own party. In the first movie, it was because he had a very unfortunate drink with a very unfortunate additive. In this movie, he gets peed on. And the group is, of course, there partying with high school students in addition to college students, so the police do eventually come in and shut down the party. This leaves Kevin worried that they're not going to have anywhere to party with his friends for the summer. So he calls his brother, as he did in the first movie, to get some advice. And his brother advises him to do what he did his first summer after college, and that's to go to the lake and rent a cabin where his friends can all hang out and party for the summer, and throw a big party at the end of the summer to cap it all off. So as they said at the end of the last movie, they were looking to move on to the next step. And it just doesn't seem like they quite know what that is at this point. At this point, they're just trying to remain friends and figure out what to do in this first summer of freedom after college. So they do rent a cabin by the lake, as it was suggested, and they have decided to pay for it by getting jobs painting houses for the summer. However, they think the four of them doing it alone won't be enough to pay for the house, so that's where we get Stifler upgraded, as Stifler becomes the fifth member of their group to go with them to work for the summer and pay for this cabin. So as in the movie, they all have a joint goal of getting to this big crescendo party at the end of the summer. In the first movie, they were working towards prom. In this movie, they're working towards this big beach bash. And this time around, like the first movie, they all have individual goals that they're working towards as well. Let's start with Jim. His goal, like the first movie, is to get together with Nadia. And he gets an opportunity again in this movie because Nadia contacts him at the beginning of summer and says that she's going to be back in Michigan at the end of summer and would like to see him. So Jim is instantly nervous in this movie, thinking that he's not ready to be with Nadia as he wasn't ready in the first movie. He apparently has only had one additional experience with a woman since Michelle from the first movie, and that was with a girl on the last day of college in his dorm room that we saw in the opening scene, and he got interrupted by his and her parents. So, to get some advice on how he was, he decides to go and find Michelle. He goes to band camp and speaks to her, and she says, well, he was pretty bad, but she can help him get better. Jim, of course, has some trouble along the way. He's embarrassed during his time at band camp. And there's, of course, the very unfortunate super glue incident, which sees him gluing his hand to, well, his private parts, which does some unfortunate damage, leaving his chances with Nadia in jeopardy, although he thinks he'll be ready in time for the party. And then Nadia gets there early, planning to throw everything into ruin. So to delay things, him and Michelle come up with a plan that they will pretend that they are dating so that Nadia won't try to sleep with Jim, and that gives them cover to continue their lessons to prepare for Nadia. And their plan that they put into action is that when it's time for the party and Jim's ready, that they will have a fake breakup of their fake relationship, and then Jim will be ready for Nadia. However, things go a little bit of a different way, as Michelle develops genuine feelings for Jim along the way, and unbeknownst to him, he is also developing feelings for her. So when the moment comes and he has the opportunity to be together with Nadia, he declines it and chooses instead to go and seek out Michelle, goes back to band camp and claims her and brings her back to the party, and they are together for this movie. And by the end of this movie, it is confirmed that Jim and Michelle are in an official relationship. Next, let's talk about Finch. Finch still has an obsession as well, stemming back from the original movie. At the end of the first movie, he slept with Stifler's mom. And although he claims to have had other conquests throughout the first year of college, he says none of them stack up and compare. So he spends this movie obsessed with getting back together with Stifler's mom and begins to study a technique called tantric, which he learns from a book that he found in Stifler's mom's bedroom. A big part of this movie is also how this causes additional tension between Stifler and Finch. It all leads up to a point where Finch thinks that Stifler's mom is arriving at the beach house. Instead, it's Stifler's little brother, so he's disappointed and devastated. But he eventually realizes that he does need to move on, and so he begins talking with other women that night. And the next day, he says he's ready to move on. He does see Stifler's mom, though, finally arrive at the very end of the movie and tells her that he can't obsess with her, and she tells him that that's a good thing, although they do decide to hook up and not waste an opportunity, and that's how the movie really ends. So Finch does get his moment of growth, but still gets to have some fun in the end. Next, I'll talk about Oz. Oz is still the most mature in the group, I would think, and has the least amount of struggle in this movie. And at the beginning of this movie, he's the only one in this movie who has a girlfriend. He's still with Heather, who he got together with in the first movie. And his big struggle in the movie is just that his girlfriend, after the first year of college, is going away to Europe for the summer. So he is just trying to find time to talk to her and connect and get through the summer until she'll come back in time for the party. And of course, he has to deal with Stifler trying to push him into hooking up with a different woman while Heather's away. Luckily, Oz is easily able to overcome that obstacle, and it just ends up with him and Heather reuniting at the end of the movie and reconnecting and having a good time at the party. Like I said, his storyline's a little more minimal. He has some good, funny moments in this movie, but he doesn't have the same struggle that the others go through in this movie. As I did mention, Stifler is upgraded to a main character in this movie, but unlike the other core four, he doesn't really have a struggle either. He's really just there, I feel, for the comic relief along the way. And finally, we have Kevin. Now, we learn that Kevin and Vicky are no longer together after having gone to separate colleges, as they discussed at the end of the first movie. But when they reunite back in town, it seems though Kevin thinks that they might be able to get back together. However, Vicky seems to have other ideas and just wants them to be friends, which is a very hard idea for Kevin to understand. And that is Kevin's struggle in this movie. He doesn't really want things to change. Even though they made a vow for the next step, he's not quite ready for everything to change. He still wants to be together with Vicky as he was before, and he still wants everything with his friends to be the same as it was before. This all leads up to the big party when Vicky's there and he goes to talk to her, and another guy walks up who turns out to be Vicky's date. This causes Kevin some turmoil, but he does come back and apologize, and Vicky says maybe they can't handle being friends, and he comes to the conclusion that he would rather be her friend than not have her in his life at all. And they do eventually have a dance together at the party and decide to remain friends, and we see them later just talking about the party and writing about it, successfully as friends, not with a relationship involved. Everybody pretty much gets the happy ending they desired. Jim ends up with Michelle, Oz is still with Heather, Kevin isn't with a woman, but him and Vicky are friends. Finch does end up with Stifler's mom eventually by the end, but as I said, does have his moment of growth where he realizes he doesn't need to obsess over her. And at one point at the party, we did see him surrounded by other women. And Stifler gets together with two women, which was his goal for the movie. He was never looking for personal growth, he was only looking to hook up with some women. I think this movie does an excellent job showing the growth of these characters in the next step, which is what they said they were going to take at the end of the first movie. Although I think what this movie taught them is that they don't exactly know what the next step is going to be, and for most of them in this movie, it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. They had to learn that sometimes you have to let go of the past and look at what the future has in store for you. And again, that's one thing I really like about these movies, is that they're not just raunchy comedies, they also have a good message to deliver along the way. And like the first movie before it, this movie doesn't go overboard with the raunchy factor. It does have probably a little bit more than the first movie did, but not dramatically a lot. I should also mention that even Nadia gets a happy ending because after Jim leaves her to go with Michelle, she ends up hooking up with, of all people, the Shermanator. And that's because he's a geek and she said she was looking for her geek after Jim said he was going to get his. And the other character who I think deserves an honorable mention is, of course, Jim's dad.
I think I bring new meaning to the word cool, honey.
Again, returning to be the cool dad, he finds Jim again in multiple compromising situations and just proceeds to try to give him the best advice he can and be an understanding father. This movie is an excellent comedy movie. It's funny, it delivers a good message, and it shows good growth amongst this group of friends over this story arc. I would highly recommend this movie for anybody to watch. So let's take a look at its scores. This movie did not fare quite as well as the first movie. This movie only got a 52% score on the Tomato Meter, which is a rotten score. It did get a little bit higher, however, on the audience score, up to a 68%. Over on IMDb, this movie got a 6.4 out of 10. My score is again a little bit higher for this movie, and I would score this movie at an 8 out of 10. This movie has a lot what I've looked for. It's got comedy, it's got character development, it's got a good story. Let me know your thoughts on this movie in the comment section below. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon.